Leather fillers are used to replace missing leather fibers from scratches, gouges, abrasions, and cuts in the surface of or through leather. When leather is scratched, the material is gone. Something is actually needed to then replace the material that has been removed. Fillers work great as they replace that lost material and then dry flexible to replicate some of the original properties before the damage. Think of it like filling a hole in drywall. Something needs to go into that hole, then it can be painted over and look as good as new. So there are a few types of kits available. Some are going to be pre-colored kits, like this one. So for example, when we've got this inside, there are all sorts of these pre-mixed colors. So all you really need to do is find one that's close to your leather, or you can mix a few to get a closer color match, and then just open it, find your leather, fill the gap, wipe it clean, and essentially you're in good shape. So if you're looking for something that's really convenient and you have a good color match, that can be a very quick and easy fix. They're generally made from PA glues and PVC-based elements with pigments and binders, allowing for flexibility once they're dry and the convenience of being in a lot of pre-mixed colors. Another option are dedicated fillers. These are going to be a little more advanced. They're often water-based resins and are available in various densities, from soft to harder. Softer, for example, if you're looking to repair a softer leather material, or harder if you're looking to repair a more dense one. A good example of soft materials would be something like an automobile upholstery seat, and something a little harder, maybe you've got a very dense leather, covering a trunk, and you want something that's rigid there, or any other type of purpose where you want a stronger filler for that lost leather. And in a pinch, I don't recommend it, though sometimes creativity and circumstance requires innovation, glue can be used. So glue will go in, it can fill that gap, it will dry flexible, and then be paintable on top. It's not going to be a great long-term solution, it's not going to be structural, but in a pinch, it's an option to explore. All right, so let's go through an example in terms of choosing a filler. Because choosing the right filler can make a huge difference in the end result. And here's a few things to keep in mind. The ease of application. Something like a pre-mixed filler is going to be really easy. There's even something like this, which is a balm, and it comes pre-colored. You basically just put it in there, wait till it dries, and then wipe it off. That's going to be quick. However, it may not match your surface texture exactly in terms of color, so it might stand out, and it may not be as strong as something like a dedicated filler. So keep that in mind. And then second, durability. A filler is likely never going to be as structurally rigid as the original leather fibers that were in there, that were removed from that scratch. So just keep that in mind. It will repair it mostly aesthetically, but in terms of durability, it won't be as strong as the original leather was. And then lastly, surface matching. Even if you're using a pre-colored option here, or if we're using something like a white dedicated filler here, we're going to have to match the surface that we're repairing with the surface that's around it. That's going to be an extra step as well. That said, that could lead to one of the best results because it would be less likely that it's noticeable compared to the area around it. So let's look at our tools, and then we will walk through an example step by step. So we're going to use mainly this filler here. So we're going to need that filler. We're going to want some paint for color matching at the end. We're going to want our heating tool to apply heat to it, our sandpaper to sand it, our putty knife to spread it, a little bit of water, and a white cotton rag to pick up some sanding residue. And then we're going to want a paintbrush so that we could paint everything to color match at the end. So that's pretty much everything. Let's start with step one. All right, for this, we're going to get our mat here. We'll put down on our workspace to protect it, put our sample right here. And the first thing we want to do is make sure that the leather inside is clean. Since we're going to be putting that filler in there, if it's binding onto anything that's loose or dirty that may come out, it's not going to have a secure bond. So just make sure everything in there is clean. If needed, use a leather cleaner beforehand and let it dry. And then once this is all set, we can begin our repair. We'll get our spatula, we'll get our repair filler, and if you look, let's open it up. It's going to be not too thick and not too liquidy, which is kind of cool. So what we'll do next is we want to apply the filler to our area. So what I'll do is I'll just get a little bit primarily on the back, and then we'll go in here and kind of work our way down. Because our next step is going to be to sand it down so it's even. So if there's enough in there, we'll know that that is filled. And some people may do a little less. I just want to make sure you could see the difference and also what our sanding will do. So with that, we'll just clean off our spatula here, so there's no extra on there. Now we're going to cap up our filler. And then we'll take our heating tool and we'll apply heat. Now something to be careful of is that when applying heat, it can damage the paint around it or actually the leather underneath as well if the heat is too high. So make sure you're at a proper distance and not applying too hot of an air. You want it to help dry, but not to burn or damage around it and end up with a second issue to repair. So I'm going to apply the heat, and then in a few, we'll do the next step. All right, so I started using the heating tool, and then I decided let's leave it overnight to air dry so it really gets dry through and through. Definitely recommend that, as a way to go where possible. So we've got that. We're going to put our heating tool away. Next thing we're going to do is take out our sandpaper. So here we have 3 different grits, 150, 320, and 1000. So we're going to start pretty fine with 1000, and essentially we're just going to take our dried surface and slowly sand that down so it's flat with the leather around it. And when you're doing it, obviously be more gentle than I'm showing at the moment, because it will sand the surfaces around it, even if you get a little far out. So just be gentle and cautious as you do that, and try to keep the sanding as concentrated as possible, also blending just a little bit around the area that we filled in. And there's going to be a little bit of an art as well as this science to make sure you get it nice and smooth. Could still feel some of it. I'm actually gonna go up to a little bit of a larger sandpaper and see if that's gonna help us. As you can see, it's obviously wearing around it. I'm doing this quickly as a demonstration, though when you're working with it, certainly, take your time so it's focused purely on the area that we're working with. All right, we're getting there. Tried a little bit of a rougher sandpaper. All right. So clearly we're taking off the paint from around it. So we're going to be touching this up anyway. That's primarily due to just doing it quickly. So if I were to do this for an actual item, I'd be very gentle and take much more time. Though if we're looking at it, we look like we're getting pretty smooth now in terms of any raised up areas. And since we're going to paint it, so we're going to cover up that discoloration anyway. So we're good there on our sanding paper. I'd probably start, I thought it may be close enough to start fine, but actually it looks like a rougher grit would have been good to start, and then work our way down to the very fine one. So that could be a helpful progression. So now that we've got that, what we'll do is we'll take our wet cloth, just kind of dip our cotton cloth into the water, and then wipe away any of the sawdust or any of the paint or filler dust that may be coming up. We don't want this to be soaking wet, just moist enough to pick up any loose fibers and kind of get them out. And now we have a prep surface that we can paint. It should feel pretty flat to the touch. And then next up is the easy part. We paint. So we just get a paintbrush, and we have our paint that matches the original color of our sample. And we'll just open that up. We'll dip in our brush. We want a little bit of paint, not too much, but enough to begin our coverage. And then once we've got that, we just come over to our piece here, and then we're just going to paint over it. And then obviously if you have areas around it you want to branch out. And then make sure you get that coverage throughout to kind of blend it. And there's a combination of things happening here. One is very bright lights, so we're going to see all kinds of imperfections. And two is I think could have sanded it even more closely, and we'll kind of see what that looks like. And that's good because I could show you the impacts of how that sanding can come out, and also the benefits of taking time, and going very slowly. All right, so we're just going to blend everything in on our paints here, and then we'll take a look in 1 second about how everything is going. So we're going to cap our paint. All right, so our sample is now drying with the paint. I'm definitely going to get some on my fingers. So here we go. Depending on the angle of the light that's filled, if we look here very closely, especially at the wet paint, which is going to highlight those details, we see that there is that filler mark in the middle. So what I would have needed to do was sand that down even finer and pretty much start to take the leather off a little bit around it, like just enough to start seeing that happening, so that we know that we're even, with that surface of the material. And that way, when you paint it over, you're not going to get as much of that bump up. So pretty much a factor of taking even more time, looking at it very closely, though that's the approach overall. And then of course, like any repair, you could work on blending it further. If you wanted to build up a couple more layers of paint around it and blend it in, it becomes more of a visual and aesthetic exercise. Though overall, that's the repair. And even if we look here, again, depending on the light, you can barely see that, now. And it looks from a distance, you barely know that there was an issue. So under super bright, fine light on wet paint, you could see a little bit there. So overall, that's how filler works. Taking a little bit of extra time and precision will lead to an even better result. And that's the basics of leather filler. If you have any questions, let us know. If you have any experiences or tips to share, we'd love to hear them. And there you have it. Until next time.